of you into the conversation in a few minutes, but for now, Rishi Sunak has announced that UK defence spending will increase. Let's listen to some of what he had to say.
We've entered a period in history in which competition between countries has sharpened profoundly. An axis of authoritarian states with different values to ours, like Russia, Iran, North Korea and China, are increasingly assertive. So the new assertiveness of these authoritarian states far from our shores must concern us, because they are increasingly acting together against the fundamental values that we all hold dear of democracy, freedom and the rule of law.
There you go. So, long story short, defence spending will go up now. It will be 2.5% of GDP. And also, apparently, that means about £75 billion across the space of 6 years. I mean, it's all well and good talking about these agitating states and these aggressive states and all the rest of it. I look at it and I think you can't even defend your border against a group of men in a rubber dinghy. So how do you think you're going to defend this country against the likes of your China, your Russia and all the rest of it? Is it just money? Is it as simple as that, Quentin?
Money is important in defence, and this is a good and serious decision. Whether or not it's going to solve the short-term problems is a very different matter, because defence spending takes an awful long time to get through. And also, arguably, actually, one of the big changes in the last year or so is that in defence, big, heavy-duty projects are now possibly going to be less important. Spending in defence is possibly going to be more agile and nimble in future, in that drones have become such a big story, and it's much cheaper to have drones. It's much cheaper to have lasers as well. And so one of the big stories in defence spending is that we're going to need less of it, funnily enough, which is slightly counterintuitive to this today. But I think the Prime Minister is right about the danger of Russia and Iran particularly. I'm less convinced by the military danger, certainly to us, of China and North Korea, but certainly the Iranians and Russians are colluding at the moment. This axis of authoritarian states, that's the phrase, shades of George W. Bush there.
Hello?
Yeah, I agree that it's a welcome move. I mean, it's a lot of money, but there are some people saying it's not enough. You have to remember that there has been a real failure to keep up with what's needed in terms of defence spending. There's also the sort of, relatively large elephant in the room, which is that you can spend all the money you like on equipment and preparations and deterrence, but you need to have a population of citizens who are a significant portion of that population who are willing to step up and use that equipment and do the defence, because you still do need the people. And we know that there's a problem with that in terms of, let me be clear, a nice problem that we've not had to have generations go to war for a significant amount of time, and I don't lament that. But it does, one of the effects of that means that, and I'm no fan of war, certainly nobody is, but it means that in terms of willingness to make that great sacrifice to imagine yourself being able to do what needs to be done in war is something that I think is just out of the realm of possibility certainly for a lot of young people. That's a cultural hill we're going to have to climb.
Not so much cultural, though. I mean, I presume you're talking about recruitment here, military recruitment. And one of the big things that affects that is unemployment rates. And because there's been low unemployment recently, it's meant it's harder for the military to recruit youngsters. But that, is in a way, that's quite a nice problem to have too.
But I don't think it's just a practical one. I think, Sunak is talking about making some statements that, I would get behind, some big statements about the fact that the difference between Russia and Iran, or, various Islamist groups in the Middle East, the civilizational differences between us as being we believing in freedom and autonomy and democracy and sovereignty, and them not believing in that. Well, having that strong sense of what it means to be part of this country, what it means to fight for your country, means that you have to have that kind of coherent national identity. And I think that we've just had a row about it in relation to St. George, but that has suffered that sense of what it means to be a British citizen, what it means to want to fight for your country. And so that sort of ideological, cultural battle has to be waged a bit better by this government or any government that comes in the future, because at the moment it's a bit of an ask to say, well, fight for your... It's not like it was in previous generations where there was a clear sense of what you would be fighting for and the kind of values around that.
But I think you make a very good point, because on the one hand, if, heaven forbid, anything was to go wrong to the point where you need particularly young, fit and able-bodied people to stand and fight for the country, if you were in that situation, when you spent years telling those people you're far right, you're racist, the younger people, you can't afford to get a house, you have all of these kind of forces going against you. But I think particularly if you're a young white male in this country, you seem to be at the lowest level of the pecking order for pretty much anything, really. But then when you then call upon those people to actually stand and fight for you, I think that you probably would find yourself with quite a big problem. And I don't know the answer to that, by the way. Well, I'm just sharing and reflecting your point.
Hold back a little bit on the self-hatred of Britain here. I think this country is a fantastic place. And I think it's a much more fantastic place than Russia or Iran. And I suspect a lot of young Russians would agree with you also, and a lot of young Iranians. And so let's not be quite so down on our country.
Nobody's been down on it. I've said...
Michelle's having a go at us the whole time. I think this place is I think you will find there will be no shortage of pride in this country if it came to a serious military emergency.
Comparing us to Russia is a bit of... I mean, I consider it to be a bit of a low bar.
But that's what we're doing, isn't it? That's what we are doing.
But to make a cheap point, it's also the case that the British Army is itself creating a situation in which sort of the things that you need to fight a war, sort of hardiness, having a tough neck, being sort of resilient, seem to be sort of dirty words, whether it's rows about gender and diversity quotas or kind of the woke stories that keep coming out of the army about so-and-so being reprimanded for misgendering or whatever it is. It feels like they're the one place in the country, the one institution that you think should be just intolerant of any nonsense like that and be focused on getting yourself, like you said, fit enough and mentally resilient enough to, let's not beat around the bush here, potentially kill people in defence of your country, the greatest sacrifice you could ever make.
And just to be clear, I'm not having a go at you.
They don't seem to be doing that job well.
I'm not having a go at you two. I'm just getting absolutely sick and tired. There's nothing aimed at you.
No, not again. I know it's not
against me. I'm sick and tired all the time of anyone that is patriotic, that is proud of their country, that's not ashamed of whether it's the flag or the anthem or whatever. I'm sick and tired of those people being called racist, being called far right, being kettled into streets and being told you can't move, whereas other people that seem to be able to celebrate their rights and all the rest of it, they don't seem to have that level of abuse or restriction placed upon them. I'm fed up of the majority of this country being told that they continuously have to bend over backwards to accommodate the whim of each and every single minority group, and if they don't, they are a horrible, awful human being that's xenophobic or whatever else it is. I get a little bit tired of it. Anyway, if I bring it back to spending on defence, Donald Trump, he very passionately spoke out and said that countries that were not willing to spend enough money on their own defence shouldn't be perhaps bailed out by NATO. Yeah. Did you agree with his sentiment on that?
Yeah. Do you remember when he told off? He went to a NATO meeting when he was President, Trump, and I think he had Angela Merkel opposite him. And she was looking at him like he was a dead sausage by the end of that one, because she didn't like being told off. He was absolutely right. And as a result, and since then, European countries or other NATO countries have shown a little bit more enthusiasm for contributing to the budget. Quite right, too. And one of the good things about this thing today, I think Sunak is showing some leadership among other NATO leaders. He's saying to them, come on, look, this is our responsibility as much as America's, and we've got to show that we are willing members of the club, because, you can't rely on Washington doing everything.
Indeed. One of the things that gets me, last night I swore to myself, right, I was not going to mention Rwanda again. I've got so bored of going around these ridiculous circles when it comes to the Rwanda plan. I never wanted to see it mentioned again until it had crossed the line. Anyway, it did cross the line about midnight. So now that is apparently imminently going to become law. Do you think this will actually change anything? I mean, you've had those people, very sadly, including a little girl, die crossing the channel. Will this actually change anything, the Rwanda plan?
No, I don't think anyone's under the illusion that it's anything other than perhaps Sunak, but I actually don't even believe he believes it himself, that this is anything other than a sort of tokenistic show of wanting to do something in capital letters. There's, the very, if you're talking about deterrent, I mean, anybody who pays any attention to British news watching the farce that has been the implementation of this bill knows that there is, in terms of deterrent, it isn't going to be effective. I also just, I mean, in terms of the sort of practicalities of stopping people traffickers and stopping the tragedy of deaths like we've seen over the last 24 hours, it isn't necessarily going to be the quick fix. What we need to do is tackle the issue of immigration much more broadly.
Just quickly, you just said that you do...
I do, yeah. I interrupt this misery fest to say that I think yesterday was, it's long overdue in the blasted House of Lords and a whole legal apparat that was trying to stop this project. I think they're disgraceful behaviour because they're basically helping the people smugglers. But I think potentially this is a very good policy, and I think there's a potential here for it, and the Home Office is in discussion with other African countries for it to be rolled out, as they say, to other African countries, and there is also the possibility of other European countries then taking the lead from Britain and doing the same. And I think that in the cumulative effect and the message going out could be extremely good. And the Home Affairs Committee went to France, North France, and they heard evidence of the impact of the original announcement on the Rwanda plan, and it was instant. The asylum seekers were immediately taking this on board.